The morning that changed everything began with a silence so pure that even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The sun had not yet risen and the faintest light touched the edges of the horizon like a soft whisper of gold across the sky. She woke before the world did, her eyes opening to the pale shimmer that spilled through the window, her hands trembling against the cold sheets as if her heart already knew that this day would not be like any other. She sat still for a moment, listening to the sound of her own breath, the slow rhythm of her thoughts, and the echo of dreams that had followed her through the night. There was something strange in the air, something that tasted of change, like the earth before the rain. She rose quietly, her bare feet pressing against the wooden floor, and every creak of the boards sounded like a secret being told. The scent of morning dew drifted through the open window, mingled with the faint perfume of jasmine from the garden below. She looked at her reflection in the glass, her face soft and pale, her eyes holding a quiet kind of sadness, but behind it all was something else, something she could not yet name. She stepped outside, her hair catching the wind, her breath forming little clouds in the cool air, and for a moment she felt like the world was waiting for her to move, waiting for her to decide. The birds began their song, slow at first, then wild and full of joy, as though they too sensed what was coming. She walked down the path that led to the edge of the fields, the sky slowly blooming above her with colors that seemed too gentle to be real. She thought of all the mornings before, all the times she had walked this same path without noticing how alive it was, how full of small miracles, the earth beneath her feet, the whisper of leaves, the hum of bees. It all felt new now, as if she had been blind until this very moment. She closed her eyes and let the sun finally touch her face, warm and soft like a promise. In the distance she saw him standing by the river, his figure outlined by the light of dawn. He was waiting there just as he said he would, his hands deep in his pockets, his gaze fixed on the horizon. She felt her heart twist inside her chest, a mix of fear and longing and something even deeper that she dared not name. She walked toward him slowly, every step echoing in her chest, and when he turned, his eyes found hers instantly, like the world itself had shifted to bring them together. He smiled, the kind of smile that carried both apology and hope, and she felt her knees weaken for a moment. Neither of them spoke, the air between them heavy with all the words left unsaid. He finally reached out his hand and she hesitated before taking it. His touch was warm, familiar and yet distant, as if they both belonged to two different versions of time. She wanted to ask him why he came back, why now, after all the years, after all the silence, but she couldn't form the words. Instead she simply held on to him, letting the river sing for them. The morning light shimmered across the water, and somewhere deep inside she understood that this was not a meeting, this was a beginning, or maybe an ending disguised as one. They walked together along the river, their steps falling into rhythm as though no time had passed. He told her about the cities he had seen, the faces that had come and gone, and how none of them felt like home. She listened without interrupting, her heart swelling with the sound of his voice that she had missed for so long. He looked older, wiser, perhaps even sadder, but there was still that same spark in his eyes, the one that used to make her believe in forever. She wanted to tell him everything, how the years had been long and heavy, how she had learned to smile through the emptiness, how she had kept the letters he wrote even though she promised herself she would forget. But she stayed silent because sometimes words only break the magic of the moment. When they reached the old bridge, the one they used to cross as children, he stopped and turned to her. The wind caught her hair, lifting it around her face like a halo, and he said softly, "Do you remember the promise we made here?" She nodded, her throat tightening with emotion. She remembered every word, every laugh, every tear, and now standing there it felt like time had folded back on itself, like the world had been waiting just for them to return to this spot. She looked into his eyes and saw everything she had ever loved and lost reflected there, and in that moment the morning light deepened, casting everything in gold, and she thought perhaps this was what fate felt like, quiet, certain, inevitable. The morning kept unfolding like a dream that did not wish to end, and yet somewhere beneath its calm there was a trembling truth waiting to surface. They stood on the bridge for what felt like forever, the water below shimmering with secrets and memories, the world around them alive and breathing. Every sound, every scent, every flutter of wings seemed to draw them deeper into the moment. She wanted to ask him why he had come back, but her heart already knew the answer. He was not here to stay, he was here because something inside him needed to return before it was too late, and that realization made the air between them colder. She looked away, pretending to study the river, but her hands betrayed her, shaking softly at her sides. He noticed it without a word, stepped closer and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles the same way he used to when she was too afraid to speak, and suddenly all the years between them dissolved like mist. They walked down from the bridge to the fields that stretched far beyond the village, the morning sun climbing higher, now painting the earth with light. He talked about his travels, about how the world was beautiful but empty without someone to share it with. His voice carried both wonder and weariness, and she felt the ache of his words sink into her bones. She wanted to tell him that she had waited every single day, that she had believed even when hope felt like a ghost haunting her nights, but instead she smiled softly, because sometimes silence says everything. They reached the edge of the meadow where the wildflowers grew in wild untamed colors, and she bent down to touch one, its petals soft and trembling in the breeze. He watched her quietly and said, "You have not changed, not really." And she looked up at him and said, "Neither have you," even though they both knew it was a lie. They sat beneath the old oak tree where they had carved the names when they were younger, the marks still there, faded but unbroken. She traced the letters with her fingers and felt tears rise to her eyes. "Do you ever wonder," she asked softly, "if we had chosen differently, what might have been?" He looked at her for a long moment and then said, "Maybe, but then we wouldn't be who we are now." And she knew he was right, but that truth did not make the ache any easier. The wind whispered through the branches, carrying the scent of rain, and somewhere in the distance thunder rolled soft and low like a warning. She looked up at the sky, the first drops beginning to fall cool against her skin, and she laughed quietly because it felt like the heavens were crying with her. He smiled too, his hair damp, his eyes shining with something that looked like peace. The rain fell harder, drenching them both, but neither moved. They sat there beneath the storm as though it were cleansing them of everything that had come before. She thought of all the mornings she had woken alone, all the nights she had whispered his name into the dark, and now here he was beside her, and yet she could feel him slipping away, not in body but in spirit, like a story nearing its final page. He reached into his coat and pulled out something small wrapped in cloth. When he placed it in her hand, she felt its weight and knew it was more than just a gift. She unwrapped it slowly, revealing a locket tarnished by time. Inside was a picture of them together, the same one she thought had been lost forever. She looked at him, her lips parting to speak, but he only shook his head. "No words," he whispered, "just remember." She wanted to tell him that she could never forget, that forgetting him would be like forgetting how to breathe, but before she could speak he stood, his eyes looking past her to the horizon, the rain easing now to a soft drizzle, the light breaking through the clouds. He said, "I have to go, there are things I cannot change, but this morning I wanted to see you one last time." She felt her heart tear open, the pain raw and endless, but she nodded because she understood some things are not meant to be held forever, some are meant only to be felt deeply and then released. He took her face in his hands, his thumbs wiping away the rain, or maybe her tears, she could not tell, and then he kissed her softly, gently, like a goodbye. She closed her eyes and let the world fall away for that one final moment. When she opened them again, he was gone. Only the whisper of the wind remained, and the river below still singing softly as if mourning too. She stood there for a long while, her heart beating slow and heavy, the air filled with the scent of wet earth and memory. She walked back toward the house, her clothes clinging to her, her feet sinking into the mud, but she did not feel the cold. She only felt the hollow quiet inside her, the kind that comes after something beautiful ends. When she reached her door, she paused, turned once more toward the horizon and whispered, "Thank you," because even though it hurt, she knew that morning had given her something she would carry forever, not loss but truth, not sorrow but peace. The days that followed felt like echoes of that morning, soft and distant, as though the world itself had shifted into another rhythm. She woke each day with the same silence that had started it all, but now there was something new in it, not emptiness but calm, the kind that comes after a storm. She would stand by the window watching the light spill across the garden, and she would remember his smile, the sound of his voice, the warmth of his hands, and it would hurt but gently, like the ache of an old song she no longer feared. She would walk to the river, sometimes her feet finding the same path they had taken that morning, and the water would shimmer as if it too remembered. She would close her eyes and let the wind touch her face, and she would whisper his name, not out of longing but gratitude, because in losing him she had found something she never knew she was searching for herself. The village went on around her, the same laughter, the same days unfolding with quiet simplicity, but inside her everything had changed. She began to notice the small things she had once overlooked, the way sunlight rested on the leaves, the sound of children playing, the scent of bread drifting from the bakery. Every detail became a thread in the tapestry of a life she had once thought was broken and now seemed whole in its own fragile way. Sometimes people asked her why she smiled when she walked alone, and she would just shake her head, because how could she explain that love, even when it ends, does not vanish, it transforms, it becomes part of the air, part of the earth, part of the light itself. She found the locket one evening lying on the table where she had left it. She opened it slowly, tracing the edges of the photograph inside, their faces young and bright, frozen in a time that no longer existed, but instead of sadness she felt warmth. She hung it by the window so the sunlight could touch it every morning, and each time the light passed through the glass it would cast a small reflection across the wall, like a reminder that some stories never truly end, they only change their shape. One morning weeks later she woke before dawn again, the same quiet, the same stillness, but this time her heart was steady. She stepped outside, the air cool against her skin, the sky beginning to blush with the promise of another sunrise. She walked to the river, her feet finding the path by memory, and when she reached the bridge she stopped. The water below caught the light, turning gold and silver, and for a moment she could almost see him there just beyond the mist, not as a ghost but as a presence, gentle and sure. She smiled softly and whispered, "I kept my promise," and the wind moved through the trees as if answering her. She sat on the bridge watching the world awaken, the birds taking flight, the sky deepening in color, the river flowing endlessly, and she realized that life was just like that, always moving, always beginning again. The pain she had once feared became part of her strength, and the love she thought had ended lived quietly inside her, guiding her toward every new dawn. She no longer waited for him to return, because in a way he never truly left. He existed in every sunrise, every whisper of the wind, every beat of her heart. That morning as the first light touched her face she felt a peace she had never known before. The same sun that once witnessed the goodbye now bathed her in warmth, and she understood at last why it had to happen the way it did. Some mornings do not just begin a day, they begin a life. They change everything, not by what they give but by what they take away and leave behind. And as she rose to walk home, her shadow stretched long across the path, her steps light, her heart open. She carried the memory of that morning within her, not as sorrow but as light, and the world seemed to breathe with her in rhythm, with a quiet unspoken truth that love once real never truly fades. It simply becomes the dawn that follows every dark night, and she walked into it unafraid, forever changed by the morning that had given her back herself.